Hello, my name is Aline White Swan. Welcome to the mysterious domain. Dracula was a man of the theater, or how Count Dracula was born in a trunk and has tread the boards ever since. As the resurrection of springtime is upon us, the vampire sleeps a little longer. Now I feel it is safe to tell you the story of vampires little considered on our side of the pond. Vlad Tepes may have been a warlord infamous for his cruelty from ancient Wallachia, but Vlad Dracula was a man of the theater. Though not the first vampire to tread the boards of the London stage, he was preceded by Varney the vampire, of course. He is certainly its star. Who remembers Varney the vampire anyway, right? It was he who brought his nefarious race under the spotlight, and his luster remains undimmed for over a century. The first literary vampire was invented by the physician John Polidori in 1818 during the famous snowbound ghost story contest in the Swiss Alps at the Villa Diodati, where Mary Shelley created Dracula's erstwhile rival, Frankenstein. Polidori's novella was called The Vampire, a Tale. Its menacing antagonist, Lord Ruthven, was based on Polidori's character assessment of the infamous poet Lord Byron, legendary womanizer and destroyer of souls. Not long after his book was published to scandalous success, John Polidori killed himself at the age of 26. John Polidori was the uncle of the pre-Raphaelite artist Dante Gabriel Rossetti and his sister, the poet Christina Rossetti. Polidori's infectious contact with the vampire was perhaps passed on to Rossetti, for much of his art, especially that inspired by his muse, the beautiful red-haired Elizabeth Siddal, who he painted right up to the moment of her death, has a lush, feverish, slightly decayed quality, suggestive of those who haunt the night. When, after many years of infidelity, Rossetti made Elizabeth Siddal his wife, she was hopelessly addicted to laudanum, a tincture of opium. She died at the age of 33, mourning over the empty cradle of her dead child. There was a lot of death in the Victorian era, dying at home and children dying. So, in a way, the vampire theme fitted with, I think, the very grief-stricken nature of society at the time, and the fact that these drugs like laudanum were legal. In Rossetti's life, the vampire strain comes to a head when, in an attempt to kickstart a literary career, Rossetti allowed his literary agent, Mr. Howell, to open her grave in Highgate Cemetery and retrieve a book of poetry he'd buried with Lizzie 10 years before. On return from his macabre errand, Howell claimed that Lizzie looked as beautiful in her grave as she had in life, her shining red hair streaming out of the coffin like waves of gold. Like a vampire, she was perfectly preserved. Haunted by grief and remorse for the horrible deed he had done, Rossetti succumbed to chloral addiction, went mad, and died at the age of 53. The Vampire, a play based on Polidori's book, was staged many times in the 1800s. These plays were very popular inspiring multiple spin-offs, much like the film versions of Dracula that Bela Lugosi brought chillingly to life on the screen. These plays were particularly popular in Paris, where they merged with the horrific Grand Guignol theater and even inspired the allegedly campy German opera Der Vampire, first presented in Leipzig in 1828. Bram Stoker himself was a man of the theater. Manager to the famous Victorian actor Henry Irving, Stoker was the driving force behind the commercial success of the Lyceum Theatre in Covent Garden, London. In fact, he invented the system of having the patrons subscribe for the entire season of plays, which of course gave the theatre the money to put on more lavish productions and kept them in business, basically. Henry Irving was considered the Lyceum Theatre's resident genius, and like many geniuses, was a moody tyrant. Bram Stoker was completely under his spell. Shakespeare was Irving's specialty, and Stoker was immersed in the blood-soaked tragedies and rich poetry of the Bard of Avon on a nightly basis. His discovery of the portrait of Lan Tepesh caused an explosion in his imagination. See, he'd been writing for quite a while. He had a few novels like Lair of the White Worm, which was made into a really strange Ken Russell film. And so he was trying to find his hit, I guess. So he saw this portrait of Lan Tepesh. It is not too far-fetched to see in Tepesh aquiline features, a reflection of the face of Henry Irving. Irving was known to excel at dark, brooding, villainous characters, his tall, thin frame often clothed in black as he lurked menacingly about the stage. Dracula was published in 1897 in London. Stoker dispensed with the charming, aristocratic, Byronesque vampire of John Polidori. Rather, his Dracula, based as this character was on Stoker's research into Balkan folklore about undead corpses preserved in their graves by feeding on the blood of the living, was creepy and repulsive in the extreme. Significantly, the book Dracula was first reviewed in the theater magazine The Stage on June 17, 1897, where it was referred to as a tour de force. Many of the qualities we associate with vampires were invented by Stoker, such as his fear of crucifixes, the Holy Sacrament or the host, the need to sleep in his country's soil, even sleeping all day only to come out at night, changing into a bat. All were inventions of Bram Stoker's fertile imagination. The association of vampires with wolves, though, is a deep part of tradition in the wolf-haunted forests and mountains of Central Europe. On its 1897 release, a staged reading of Dracula, or the Undead as it was originally called, was held at the Lyceum Theatre to secure its copyright. Behind the actors loomed the set of Irving's current production of Macbeth. This is also a common thread in the sense that the Bela Lugosi's Dracula movie set was used for productions of other horror films. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I imagine the reading on a Macbeth theater set must have been pretty dramatic. Dracula was already being prepared for a dramatic performance, but Irving refused to play the part. When the play was produced, it was not according to Stoker's vision, but rather in cheap, pirated, slipshod productions in London's theater dives that were an embarrassment to the disappointed Stoker. Though he failed on the stage due to theatrical politics and B-level productions, Dracula would be raised from impending obscurity by the new art of cinema. The 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu would seal his future as a movie star. Despite a few alterations and name changes, The script of Nosferatu sticks very closely to the spirit of the novel. So close, in fact, that Stoker's widow, Florence, was outraged at what she considered a violation of copyright and sued the film's producers, the Prana Film Company, and the director, Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau. After a 3-year battle, the tenacious widow Stoker won and demanded all prints of the film to be destroyed. Woe to the future of Dracula and his fans had her wishes been carried out to the letter. One reel was discovered in Denmark, saving this masterpiece for all of us. It seems that Count Dracula refuses to bow out gracefully. After the success of Nosferatu, many more productions of Dracula were staged in London and Dublin with varying success. Few people realize that Bela Lugosi, an actor from the same part of the world as Vlad Tepes, originated his character of Count Dracula on the New York stage, and that he had to learn his lines phonetically. Because of Lugosi's legendary performance in the play, Dracula drew the attention of Hollywood, where he would become a film superstar. Perhaps it is Lugosi's portrayal, a blend of the Byronic, sexy, cultured aristocrat of Polidori, with the supernatural powers bequeathed to him by Stoker, that made Count Dracula truly immortal. Over many decades, the greatest film directors and finest actors have taken a stab at infusing their vision of the undead Count onto film. Lugosi brought Dracula back to life several times, and the British actor Christopher Lee followed this path with a far more primal and animalistic version of Dracula in a series by the Hammer House of Horror. We've had Frank Langella's suave, sexy performance in 1979's Dracula, Klaus Kinski's hypnotic recreation of Max Schreck's vampire in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, Gary Oldman's deep and complex portrayal in my favorite of all time, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. Many vampire films that are not Dracula still follow many of the patterns set by Bram Stoker and John Polidori: aristocratic, elegantly lethal, seductive, shape-shifting, loathsome or magical, creatures of the night. If you made it all the way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you would like to see more, please like, share, and subscribe. And perhaps head over to my other channel, The Mysterious Domain Movie Palace, for really old, wonderful Gothic films, many with vampire themes from the 1960s and 70s. So thank you again, and have a good evening.